And now, from the dark corners of the internet, where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the beer flows steady, it's Paul's Security Weekly. This segment is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks, creators of the next generation firewalls, helping you enforce network security policies based on applications, users, and content. Visit them on the web at paloaltonetworks.com. And by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security training, certification, and research. Visit sans.org to learn more. Now, fire up a packet capture, pour yourself a beer, and give the intern control of your botnet. Here's your host, insert something funny here, Paul Asadorian.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, as Jack just said. And yes, I'm smoking a pipe. And yes, it is tobacco. It's not that kind of pipe. We're not in Colorado.
I was going to say it I don't recognize the smell. It must be tobacco.
Yes. It's very nice to be here this evening with Mr. Jack Daniel to my right.
It's a lovely evening out. I'm wearing my shipwright shirt because it hasn't stopped raining in about 4 months now, so I think it's time to build a freaking ark and get out of the Northeast. But, yes, good to be back after being off for B-Sides DC last Thursday.
Very cool. There is still a PVS contest from Tenable. You can register at the link in the show notes. You can qualify to receive even an AR drone as well as some network taps as well. So you got to use PVS to find something cool. So make sure you go do that. This weekend I will be teaching embedded device security assessments for the rest of us. So if you missed it, you're probably out of luck at this point by the time you hear this, because I will be already teaching it. On Monday will be actually day 2. And then I'll come back and we're going to do a whole bunch of podcasts right up until the end of the year, until December 19th, when we'll do a podcast for episode 400, which I'm very excited about.
Sweet. 400.
400 episodes.
It's like almost 9 years or something, isn't it?
It will be 9 years this year. Yes, it will be.
Wow.
Yes.
Damn, you're old.
I am. Yeah, to be doing a podcast for 9 years, that actually does qualify you as being old. So, yes. Oh, sorry, I had a senior moment there.
Yeah.
Larry's teaching at the same conference. I don't have any other announcements about upcoming stuff. As we get towards the end of the year, we start to wind down on our travel and events, other than episode 400, which, again, December 19th. Did I get that right? 19th, right? It's only Paul's Security Weekly. I should probably know these things.
That sounds like the date. Sounds like the date, the 19th.
19th. So feel free to come here in studio if you're in Rhode Island or want to come to Rhode Island. It's
a
very cold time of year in Rhode Island.
That is the week before that holiday thing. So
it is.
There may be a Father Christmas sighting,
yes.
as there often is that time of year.
Episode 400,
it will be festive.
Christmas. We'll decorate.
There will be Santa's laps to sit
Someone
on
make a
things.
note to decorate the studio for Christmas. Someone's got to be in charge of that. Certainly not me. I'm the Halloween decoration guy.
You can tell by the black.
By the black. Well, my house is decorated. I didn't actually decorate my studio for Halloween. I put all my decorations at my house. So.
Well, you have small people, and they appreciate those sort of things.
Yeah, and my 18-month-old is not scared by it. He thinks that all of the creepy zombies and limbs hanging from the trees are hilarious.
That's awesome.
So, until such time he's old enough to be actually scared by it. But my older one is not scared by it either. But he's not so much into it. I mean, he's 6, wants to go ride his bike and play with his friends.
Right.
I'm setting up the Halloween decorations. See you, Dad. Anyway. So, yeah, someone make a note to decorate the studio. And that's pretty much all we have as far as announcements go. We have no one on via Skype other than the fabulous Russell Butturini. Russell is a senior enterprise security architect for a large wellness solutions company in Nashville, Tennessee, where he oversees everything that isn't compliance, which actually bores Russell to tears. He's presented at several conferences and authored multiple security tools such as the U3 Incident Response Switchblade, the network-attached storage enumerator, and noSQLMap. These are amazing accomplishments considering he was once fired from a job at Wendy's after a week and a half of employment. Russell, welcome to the show. I don't know if you wrote your bio or if our staff took certain
That's now public knowledge. That's great.
liberties there. So you have to start after that introduction, which telling us why you came to be fired from Wendy's after a week and a half. I personally love Wendy's.
Well, the short version of that is I didn't show up because I just hated it so much.
Well,
the
that's one strategy.
Of that is I had a Volvo, which has an '89 Volvo 740 GL. I was in college at the time, and the other people that worked there decided I was Hollywood because I had a Volvo, and they didn't seem to understand that the older the Volvo was, the less the car was worth. So it was not a great environment, and so I one Sunday was supposed to go in, and I just said no, I'm not going, and that was the end of that. So I went in to try to quit officially, and they said, well, after you didn't show up one day, we fired you anyway. So
how nice of them.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. So, Russell, you were at DerbyCon. What did you think of DerbyCon?
I was at DerbyCon. It was great this year. I've been to the last three, and I think this was probably one of the best ones yet. So
very cool. And, excuse me, you gave a presentation at DerbyCon.
I did. I gave a presentation on NoSQL for penetration testers.
So explain to us what you mean by NoSQL and kind of set the stage for your talk, Russ.
Sure. So I found, in my reading and surfing the Twitterverse that NoSQL tends to be a very broad definition. And the way I've come up with to explain it is it's a data storage mechanism that's queryable that is indifferent as to the format the data takes as it goes into the storage or how it's stored. So if you think about a traditional relational database, you have very static things like schemas, tables, columns, data types. Whereas a NoSQL database, it's really just collections of key value pairs. So I can have inside one document, which is the storage unit for, be about the equivalent of a row in a relational database. I could have one row or document with 5 values, another document with 7 values, different data types mixed and matched. And the idea is you have this schemaless architecture to insert data into.
And you haven't said the term big data yet. I'm kind of...
I know. Well, you guys had just started drinking, so I figured I'd go easy, But,
I was very impressed. You made it all this way without saying big data, Russ.
It's they're really geared toward big data purposes. So.
And do you have experience with some of these big data technologies?
We do a little bit at my employer, but that's actually kind of how I got started in some of the NoSQL stuff. We wrote our first NoSQL application back in 2012.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask which?
Or not DerbyCon, DEF CON in 2013, and I saw a talk by a guy I think you know, Paul Ming Chow.
Yes.
And great talk on NoSQL insecurity, and that's kind of what got me interested in it. And so
now, is your experience? I hate to talk about specific technologies, but in this context, yeah. So which is it? Hadoop? Is it MongoDB?
MongoDB.
Okay. That seems to be the pretty popular one from what I've spoken with people about.
Yeah, and I had a reference, actually, in my slides for my talk. They have a statistic, and I don't know how they calculated this, but it's something like 49% of all LinkedIn profiles mentioning NoSQL reference MongoDB. And that's actually the statistic that Tenjin uses for Mongo market penetration, I guess.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. It could say MongoDB sucked and we ripped it out, and I was involved in ripping it out.
Yeah. But MongoDB is open source, correct?
It is open source. There's an open source version and an enterprise version. The enterprise version, I think, is around $7,500 a year. And from a security perspective, most of the good security technology they have, like native SSL encryption, some of the more advanced authentication mechanisms, are only available in the enterprise version.
Now, I get asked a lot, Russ, if there are standards to kind of govern how security should be implemented on big data installations that use these technologies such as MongoDB. in your research, have you found any of these other than the one that comes from MongoDB itself?
Well, and that's what's really interesting about NoSQL platforms is they're all very, very different in how they implement security and how they implement their. I mean, just the architecture of the platforms is all very different. Take an example between Mongo and CouchDB.
Mm-hmm.
MongoDB's hierarchy is databases, and then collections, and then documents, and then key value pairs. But inside Couch, there's only databases and then documents and key value pairs. You have a whole organizational unit of data missing. And that's what you'll find. With relational databases, as you move from platform to platform, things, between SQL Server and Oracle, for example, they're kind of the same, right?
There are commonalities.
They might do things a little bit different way, but they're kind of the same. But inside these big data databases, these schemaless databases, they're all very different in how they do things.
Cool. So back to standards, have you found one that kind of governs how we do some of these big data installations?
No, I have not. Other than what the vendor for each independent
database has
provides.
produced, right? Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. A lot of people are very concerned about that, actually.
Agreed.
That's one of the top concerns, I think, and it's not, it's a multifaceted problem. There's the security, like geeks like us appeal to in terms of the database itself, but then there's also how do you deal with some of the privacy issues around the data that you're collecting, and how are you using the technology? So there's almost like we need two different kind of standards. And since big data is used to collect a lot of personal information and correlate between it, right? I mean, that's part of the reason you do it. What extra protections do you have to put in place to protect that?
Right, exactly. And I don't think these were ever really intended for some of the ways they're being used now.
Oh, interesting.
But they're, some of the good case studies that MongoDB has on their site are around, we use noSQL technologies to dynamically collect data on cable boxes to push channel listings into, or, track bus GPS coordinates, which are all publicly available anyway. But if you go and look at all their case studies, none of them reference using noSQL technology for sensitive data. And so, but now they're so easy to develop for that, developers are starting to use them for everything. And it's a lot easier to write code for them. It's a lot easier to deploy. You can move data around more easily. You can scale them very easily. Another buzzword, right? Drink cloud.
Yeah.
You can run in the cloud quickly. I know for MongoDB, Azure, and Google Cloud, and I think AWS offer one-click deployments for MongoDB.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Now, Russell, when you're designing your enterprise big data installation and security architecture, is that easel in the background an integral part of that?
Do you need another drink already? I mean,
yeah, that's actually my 6-year-old who's smarter than me.
My buzzword?
yeah, buzzwords.
Sorry about the buzzwords there.
No, that's okay. No, that's my 6-year-old's drawing of, I don't know what. But it has some complex math that I don't understand on it.
MongoDB security architecture.
Yeah, it could be DB security architecture. Yeah.
Very nice. Teaching them young. I like it.
That's right.
So, excuse me. You wrote a tool. I want you to tell us all about why you wrote the tool and what it does, and it's called noSQLMap.
That's right. Yeah. So when I started doing research after Ming's talk on noSQL, and I started reading a lot of papers, and there are papers dating back as early as 2009 on some of this stuff. People were talking about it as soon as these technologies came about. Brian Sullivan did some stuff on the Adobe blogs. Will Urbanski had a good talk at AppSec USA back in 2012. And the things I found was there was a lot of discussion about a couple of things. One was it was a lot of denial of service, where you could write arbitrary schema into the database because basically NoSQL databases will accept whatever they're fed. If you don't have a schema, there's nothing that says, well, this doesn't exist, or this should be an integer and you've provided a string, that sort of thing, which is interesting, but not if you're a penetration tester or an enterprise security guy. Not really, doesn't demonstrate risk appropriately. And the other thing I found was the proof of concepts that they had for the native language of most of these databases, JavaScript. So people had written kind of custom JavaScript exploits for these databases, but they didn't really work on all the different platforms. And so the idea behind noSQLMap was to provide both network-based attacks and web application attacks for NoSQL platforms and web applications using them using NoSQL on their back end, and provide a single source of truth or a single source of tools for penetration testers who might encounter one of these.
So 2012 was the year of big data. That's when it was popular at RSA, right? Yeah.
Right.
And it seems like we haven't really made any headway since then.
No, and that's one of the things that's really kind of interesting is as there are newer versions of these platforms that are released, the security is not getting any better. I had originally started writing my talk that I was going to submit around, the one I ultimately did at besides Nashville and DerbyCon in the winter, in this winter. And in April, they said MongoDB releases 2.6. And I'm sitting in the doctor's office, I'm reading on Twitter, 2.6 is out. You never have to get a security exception to run MongoDB ever again. And I was like, oh gosh, my whole talk's shot. I come home, I started reading the release notes. And what I found was they didn't fix any of the security problems. There's still no authentication by default. There's still weak password hashing. It still accepts arbitrary schema. There's still no logging. So even though we've been going through this for a couple of years now, and some of these big data architectures and some of these NoSQL and schemaless data collection technologies, there's no progress being made on the security front. And I go back to a quote that Rich Mogul actually said on your guys' show, which was that they had talked to the MongoDB guys and that they just didn't care because their customers weren't asking for it. And I think that's largely because their customers are developers, and the developers are more interested in ease of use, ease of deployment, than they are the security features.
That's an interesting perspective on that.
Yeah.
So, given all of that, you said, let me write a tool to help everyone, right? Is that basically what it stemmed from?
Yeah, so, I figured I'm going to have to start testing these things since we're now using NoSQL in my day job. And I actually wanted to learn more Python than I knew, which was very little when I started. And so it was a good learning experience for that. And, I kind of put it up on GitHub just to back it up and didn't really promote it. And people just started stumbling across it and emailing me and saying, hey, well, you could do this, or it'd be awesome if you did this, or I want to write some documentation, or I want to help. And the community around it has been really fantastic. It seems to be an area a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting that just the simple fact that you're trying to solve a problem, maybe in security like you were, or I have been in the past, and you put it up on GitHub, and it starts attracting attention, and you're like, wow, I think that's a really cool aspect of the community, and not for every case, but in a lot of cases, that can really help bring some of these problems to light and help people give some solutions, provide people with solutions to solve those problems.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's been really fantastic. There was a guy named Jason Haddix. I don't know if you guys know Jason.
That sounds
he
familiar.
works for HP, actually. HP used to be called Shadow Labs, and I think he's moved on to a different division. But he just found the tool at random, posted a tweet about, hey, this is cool. You guys should check this out. Well, he has a gajillion followers or whatever. And I'm sitting at work one day, my phone just starts going nuts. People sending me emails, retweeting, sending me direct messages, following. This is incredible. Hey, this is great. How about if you add this? Or it really seems to be, like I said, an area a lot of people are interested in.
That's really cool. So now, what? So when you first started developing your tool, what kind of features did you build in, and what's the kind of the function of your tool?
Sure. So the way I built the tool, obviously I sort of borrowed the name from SQLMap because I love SQLMap. And one of the things I decided to do differently was not use the command line interface, because one of the things that drives me nuts in SQLMap is the case-sensitive command line switches.
Yep.
Where you type a big long command and you put a lowercase t instead of a capital T, and then the whole thing doesn't work, and then you're trying to find it. And so I've got a menu-based system. It doesn't do just web application attacks. It does, if you find, say, an anonymously accessible MongoDB server or CouchDB server now in 0.5, or you brute force some credentials for some, it allows you to do, on the network level, it allows you to do a few things. It allows you to enumerate the databases and collections. It allows you to actually replicate with the data to your own MongoDB instance, which is pretty handy because...
so do they support database replication in NoSQL?
Yeah, and so the thing that's interesting is they're really designed for it, because the idea is you can have a developer who might want to replicate a development database to his laptop and take it home and work in his development environment
Oh,
locally,
because
right?
that's
So with
safe.
MongoDB, it's built into the drivers.
Yeah.
With CouchDB, and Couch uses a RESTful API, so it's all HTTP requests. It's a single post, and in the body of the post, you say, "Give me this, put it here," and it moves the data for you. So, so from an attacker perspective, and one of the other things about MongoDB that's interesting, and there was a great talk by a guy named Matt Bromley at DerbyCon as well, in the stable talks about how little these databases log by default, especially MongoDB. So they're, unless they've turned on serious levels of logging that aren't on by default, there's no evidence you did this, right? So if I'm an attacker and I find this, do I really want to sit on your server and query and try to extract data out, or why don't I just run one command, which is native to the driver, replicate it out to my own instance, and drive off with it and do everything on my own time outside your view?
But now,
So,
Russell, aren't these
That's all right.
Go ahead.
Your intense analysis of NetFlow and other things on the network would see. Never mind.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the databases are really
in
big
my
'cause it's big
fantasies.
data, right?
Right.
So, so it would take a long time for somebody to move one. Defense by size, I guess. But so yeah, so that's sort of the network attacks. I also have built-in password crackers. If for CouchDB and Mongo, the password encryption is really weak in Mongo. It's the username :Mongo : and the password put through one round of MD5. In CouchDB, it's, I don't remember the exact format, but prior to 1.3, it's SHA-1. It's basically the same thing as Mongo with SHA-1, and then after 1.3, it's PBKDF2. It was an algorithm I hadn't heard of, but they do 10 iterations of it, and they said they switched to make brute force attacks harder, or slower rather, not harder.
Yep.
But I found it's pretty much the same speed with only 10 iterations as it was to crack SHA-1. So that's all built into the tool. And then the other part is taking some of the web application stuff. So most of these NoSQL platforms want to push security out to the drivers and the client side and not do security at the database level. So there's some web app attacks where you can, good examples in PHP, you take the driver expects an associative array as its input, and this works in Express.js as well. So if you put in square brackets some syntax, some NoSQL syntax, like in MongoDB it'd be bracket $ne bracket, it will convert that whole string into an associative array. And so what you've done effectively is change the statement back from give me everything that equals this to give me everything that is not equal to this, which would return all the records in the database. And the way you handle it in noSQLMap is generate a random string, which most likely would never exist. Give me everything that's not equal to this random thing, and it will return it. The other thing that they do on the web app level, or that the tool does on web app level, is there's a query in MongoDB called a where query, which allows you to submit JavaScript from your application straight into the server for execution. So depending on how the code is written, it's possible to insert arbitrary JavaScript in very much in the same way we've closed traditional SQL injection, where you close off a variable, insert a bit of something, and comment the rest out. You can basically do the same thing with the where query in MongoDB-based web applications. So I can submit some arbitrary JavaScript, and depending on the version, I can potentially touch sensitive areas like the users table, the password hash table.
I like it when you touch my sensitive areas.
Oh well, you know, nobody touches mine though. My wife's not listening. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So but yeah, you can get through the you get to the system portions of the application, and so basically one of the things I implemented, this is very much how SQLMap works as well, is start injecting some logic into the return values in the JavaScript. So like if db.system, the first character of the first user in db.system users is A, return true, and then observe the HTTP response sizes, and if I get something a lot bigger, I know the injection worked, and then we can calculate usernames, password hashes, database names, and other things on the back end, and then crack them straight through noSQLMap. I've also got some other little tools like scanners for default access and things built in as well.
Very cool. Very cool. So what's coming up next for noSQLMap?
So yeah, so my plan is, like I said, I didn't know a lot of Python before I started, and I know more now than I did, but I'm still not great at it. So my plan is to try to clean up all the mistakes I made when I started with each subsequent release. So I just did a major release at DerbyCon, which is 0.5. I'm going to do a maintenance release to fix a few things, add a couple features. That should be out in the next, time permitting, 1 to 2 months. And then going forward, every major release, I want to support a new NoSQL platform. So the next one I have up, right now MongoDB and CouchDB are supported. The next one I'm planning to write is Cassandra. Probably after that, may get into HBase and some things like that. So
now is Hadoop Hadoop is another platform, right, of the same type that is commercial only?
HBase is installed with Hadoop by default, and HBase is the NoSQL platform for Hadoop.
Oh, I gotcha.
And what's interesting about HBase is that it actually provides a traditional SQL interface for developers to query the database through, so you can write real relational SQL instead of having to learn the syntax for Hadoop or HBase.
Have you considered Metasploit integration?
Yeah, I need to get better writing Ruby first.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
Metasploit has some things actually. Metasploit has a anonymous access scanner, and there actually is a little bit of a Metasploit integration in noSQLMap. So prior to MongoDB 2.2, or 2.2 and prior rather, there is a remote code execution exploit, and you can launch that actually if noSQLMap fingerprints a target as prior to Mongo 2.2, you can actually launch the Metasploit exploits for that straight from the tool. And the thing that's really scary about this, I had some stats in my DerbyCon talk. I extracted a bunch of data from Shodan about around Mongo databases exposed to the internet, and also Project Unicorn. Are you guys familiar with Project Unicorn?
No. Okay,
so what these guys did, and they've had trouble finding sponsors to stay online, but they scanned the whole internet for Heartbleed, Open MySQL access, and Open MongoDB access.
Interesting combination.
Like I said, I'm sorry?
Interesting combination.
Yeah. It is. And the idea was to educate, and they started informing people, and they would show them, like, we scanned the internet, and this is what we found on your IP. And a lot of stuff started getting closed off. So the thing is, they didn't build any API or any method for extracting the data which is... So I wrote a curl script that would go through and just change the page number and then scrape all the IPs off the page. And I got to about page 30. They had 102,000 MongoDB databases exposed to the internet with no credentialed access.
How many?
102,000.
Wow.
Okay. So I got to page 30 of scraping these, and all of a sudden it stopped working and never worked again. So I think they figured out what I was doing.
Yeah, they caught your scraper.
Yeah. So, and then I extracted the data from Shodan as well, and I came up with about 35,000 IPs, I think, and about half those had no authentication turned on. Most of them were offline, because the data on Shodan gets stale after a while.
Yeah.
And these are fairly disposable services. You stand them up, play with them for a day, and then throw them out on cloud services.
Well, like you said, cloud services, you can just go create a MongoDB instance.
Yeah, one click, and you got a MongoDB instance deployed. So I did some version fingerprinting on these, and what I found was, out of that sample size of about 18,000, a little over a third of them were prior to 2.2.
Now, Russ, I'm sorry, back up. Explain the differences between MongoDB, because there have been some significant changes, and it has a lot of security implications between the major MongoDB releases.
Agreed. Yeah. So MongoDB puts out a major release every 6 months, which is a pretty stiff release cycle to try to keep up with. And
we got you. I got you beat. Oh, did I say that out loud? Sorry. Go ahead.
But so every 6 months you have to do a major upgrade, right? So they actually put in the release notes, between major releases, it's entirely possible that we will break your application or we will break your stuff. So what's really your incentive to upgrade, right? And between MongoDB 2.2 and 2.4, they actually removed some access to the DB class, which is where a lot of the things we were talking about, like the password hashes and the users table, things like that, and the indexes are stored. So you couldn't actually access those from web applications anymore. Between 2.4 and 2.6, they added some new authentication schemes and so forth. But again, the thing that concerns me, and particularly from scanning that many databases, is there really is no incentive to patch. And if you're running on these cloud services, you might stand something up for a day, play with it, and then your company's made a $250,000 deposit with Azure or Google Cloud or AWS, whatever the case may be. You have a machine out there that's eating $10, $15 a month, and it just sits there, right? And so nobody ever goes back and patches it or keeps it up to date. And so next time one of these 0 days for MongoDB or one of these remote code execution exploits for MongoDB comes down the pipe, the machine's just sitting out there and nobody remembers it's there because that developer who quit 6 months ago left it there and never decommissioned it. So
you've talked to me about that problem.
Yes.
It's almost like the whack-a-mole problem that I described, where people can just create new instances of systems and not worry about patching them because they forget about them, and then they pause them, and then you do a scan while it's paused, and you're like, well, I don't have any vulnerabilities, and then
Right.
developer goes back in and does some stuff, and then you're like, and you may not scan during that window, but it's
Right.
vulnerable, and then you end up with these systems out there that are essentially continual. It's almost like continual legacy that happens with cloud service.
Well, I remember we talked about it around around just virtualization, and so virtualization in your data center is one thing, because even though it's easy to stand up servers, it seems like there's infinite resources. There really is still some finite constraint on what you can stand up. But when you move to the cloud, there isn't a finite constraint on what you can stand up because you're on somebody else's hardware, right?
Yeah. Except
so
you're paying for it when you're on the cloud.
You're paying for it, but you're not paying for it as much as you would, if it was in your own data center. You're not buying servers and storage and so forth.
Yeah, it's another $10 or $15 a month, like you said, which
right.
is flying
If
under
you
the radar.
add in, it's commodity computing, right?
Cool. So, other than noSQLMap, Russ, what's like next on your list to take over the world?
So, for the project I'm working on now, and I've got a junior guy I hired on about a year ago. Hi, Josh. He listens to this, I'm sure.
Oh, Josh hasn't quit yet working for you?
No, he has not.
Wow.
It's shocking. But I'm trying to get him to do a presentation at a security conference, because I think everybody should suffer through that at least once in their life.
That's dude, good for you, man. That's awesome. I like how you're motivating your employees.
So that's what I'm going to make sure that gets in his objectives for the year.
Absolutely.
But what I've got Josh working on is I really want to do something different.
Russell, don't forget. If you want to be nice to him, you know where you can send him where he gets mentored, or she. I'm being sexist, assuming that.
Besides
Right.
Chicago or Vegas or several others.
Besides Nashville? Is there a besides Nashville?
There is
an
Besides
awesome
Nashville.
B-sides in
Everybody
Nashville.
should come to it. It's a really good event.
It is a great event, and you can go down and hang out with the tourists on whatever the hell that street is that's full of terrifying bridal shower parties. I don't know.
Broadway. Yeah, that's right. You were at Besides Nashville this year. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yes, that's where I want my bride to be drunk with. Never mind.
With a bunch of hackers.
As opposed to Louisville, were you guys out at DerbyCon?
Oh yeah. That's
God.
another one
Yes,
that's like
yeah.
bride to be heaven if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah. Louisville, actually, Beale Street in Memphis has a bit of that. Broadway in Nashville. It's should you ever have excess faith in humanity, you should check these streets out.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, you were actually trying to say
I
something.
live here, but so anyway, yeah. So what I want to work on with Josh is I want to get a system to essentially create randomized attackers or randomized bad actions in your network. It's almost like a load runner or a QA tool for your security tools, right? So you start up these, we're calling them actually skitty monkeys after the chaos monkeys that Netflix uses.
Yeah.
And the idea is we have a fuzzy monkey who will send random amounts of network data to an open port. We have scanner monkeys that do random Nessus scans. We have exploit monkeys that pull out random Metasploit exploits and launch them. And the idea is you let these things run, and then at the end, you get a report of everything the monkeys did, and you go back to your tools, whether it's your logging engine, your IPS, your firewall, your antivirus, whatever, and you see, what got stopped, what got recorded, and how do you detect anomalies in your network? Because one of the things, you guys talk about it, and the antivirus is dead. Well, I'd submit that all signature-based or rule-based security technology is dead, because everything we're looking for in those tools has to fit a specific pattern.
Right.
And when attackers are coming in, it's not necessarily going to fit that pattern. So if we have something totally random, where maybe the machine that's scanning your network isn't the same machine that's attacking your network, something like that, then we need to start tuning our tools to look for those anomalies. So the idea is to be able to generate something random to practice and do QA before something really happens.
Very cool.
So that's next.
Awesome. Russ, you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Yeah, I
have you been
so.
preparing for this? Because I know you listen to the show. You have for a long time.
Yeah, I answer the questions in my head all the time in the car, but I still have no idea what I'm going to say.
All right. 3 words to describe yourself.
Way too loud.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Miley Cyrus.
God, you are merciless.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Practical applications of hair metal to a career in IT.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Well, I play Italian rules since I'm Italian, so third. It's not a regulation game unless you have 3.
Nice.
In Italy.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
I'll take Bruce Springsteen and Katy Perry.
Katy Perry.
Yeah. Did you watch my DerbyCon talk?
No, I haven't yet.
So this is somebody. I gave the talk at the Wall of Sheep. I was sort of a last minute fill in at the Wall of Sheep at DEF CON, and originally it was Blazing Saddles themed. The Mel Brooks movie, Mongo, right? The big guy from Blazing Saddles. Well, somebody sent me a message a couple weeks later and said you shouldn't use that movie. It's offensive to people. It's, I was like, gosh, it's like 50 years old. How is that movie offensive? But anyway, so I removed all the Blazing Saddles references and inserted pictures of Katy Perry to fill in. So
just because that was someone you randomly picked to fill in?
Yeah, just because that was, yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Props to you.
And there was a boob joke like on the 3rd slide, so that made it even better.
Now I'm definitely going to go watch your talk.
You have to, yeah.
Her boobs
In fact, most of the people in the talk, it was 9 a.m. on Saturday, and not only did it wake them up, they looked like they would have been really happy if I just stayed on that slide for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So. I could have ended the talk right there.
I mean, they're not gigantic, but they're very perky.
Yeah.
So I get what I feel you there. It's cool.
Right.
I'm a man who gets behind the boobs.
That's right.
Or anyway. Russ, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Thank you,
Finally,
sir.
Russ and I have known each other for a very long time.
Very long time. Yeah, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, very cool. Russ, thank you again. And with that, we're going to take a short break and then come back. And our production assistant, now turned director of e-commerce, is going to come on the show and do a technical segment. So be sure to stay tuned and don't miss it coming up next.